10 years ago, IRiS came to be thanks to the hard work, the enthusiasm, the amazing organizational skill, the intellectual energy of a small group of colleagues. First of all, our founding director, Jenny Filimo, and together with Dr. Lisa Goodson and our administrator, Anne Bolstrich. All of us are still here after 10 years, so we are particularly grateful. Many people have come up after that. They joined us, others have left. I myself joined IRiS in 2013, just a few months after the launch, and I've been here since. In October 2012, Professor Steve Vertove came to the University of Birmingham to give a distinguished lecture to mark the launch of IRiS. Steve's talk was for us a great boost, both internally, because a lot of people finally found out that there was this new initiative, but also in terms of building out the public profile of our institute. 10 years is a long time in our fast-moving academic world. For those of you based in the UK, it's almost 2 full ref cycles. It's a long time in the lives of the people and communities we work with, and it's definitely a long life in the world of we all, researchers and researched, and the boundaries between these two groups are far from clear-cut. In 2012, Superdiversity as a term was only 5 years old. It was debated, contested, appropriated, refined, and sometimes rejected. A growing number of scholars in a range of disciplines began to adopt it and use it to reflect on what to many appear to be a rapidly changing and increasingly complex society, stemming from the post-Cold War geopolitical realignment and the triumph of neoliberal globalization, the famous end of history. The world accelerated, to use Thomas Eriksson's concept, and complex socioeconomic transformation came with it, together with a series of systematic crises, including what is now universally recognized as perhaps the greatest one, the climate and environmental crisis. Mobility and migration ignited in many places, for example, the global cities so eloquently discussed by Saskia Sassen, a process of diversification of diversity. Steve aptly gave a word to this phenomenon, superdiversity. Over the years, we have discussed if this was a concept, a method, a descriptor, but I leave it to conversation for the panels. I wanted instead to focus on one objection that over the years has surfaced many times, that migration and diversity are nothing new, that they existed before. Some have pointed out how imperial metropoles, Rome, Paris, Constantinople, London, Vienna, Moscow, etc., have always attracted people from elsewhere. This is of course true, and archaeological evidence has even demonstrated that how among the roughly 30,000 Roman troops that invaded Britain 3 times 2,000 years ago, there were soldiers from North Africa and elsewhere in the vast and yet territorially bordered Roman Empire. And this is a point I want to stress that sometimes gets overlooked. Who goes where is not an independent variable. You just need to give a quick glance to the amazing visualization of global migration published in Science by Alexander in 2014 to see the legacy of history and where people go and why. And this legacy lasts for centuries in some cases. There are reasons why it was possible for a North African soldier and not an Indian one to be in Britain 2,000 years ago. Geopolitical and economic forces define and shape the realm of the possible when it comes to mobility and migration. And immigration and citizenship laws, passport, borders, digital and otherwise, are the instruments, the technologies of powers that states and early on empire used to discipline, manage, regulate these mobilities and the lives of those who move. In other words, who went to live or visit Rome 2,000 years ago, or to work in Paris or London or Liverpool in the age of the empire, was moved by forces that are not necessarily the same that move people now, and in conditions that are obviously different, even if people may come nominally from the same city or village or country. So as much as neoliberal globalization is different from the political economy of the ancient regime, so it's the geopolitics of migration and diversity that stems from it. And if, as some have pointed out, neoliberal globalization is in retreat, For some, since the 2000s financial crisis, for others, since Trump or since Brexit and the affirmation of nationalist and protectionist government in many countries, then we should start to think how, in what ways, the new political and economic reality may affect migration and diversity in the years to come. But of course, those who migrated due to previous circumstances and conditions do not disappear. And this is where our societies become increasingly layered, stratified and complex. And their very presence becomes itself a force and a driver of social and political and economic change. You just need to walk around the neighborhoods of Birmingham to see how different generations of migration, for example, pre- and post-World War II migrants and their descendants from the Empire and the Commonwealth, the new Europeans who moved in with the various rounds of enlargement, the asylum seekers and refugees of the Cold War and of the post-Cold War era, the refugees from the more recent and current conflict in Afghanistan, Syria and Ukraine, shape and share the spaces of the city. It's easy to see just looking at the quarterly ONS, Office of National Statistics, bulletin, how, for example, an event like Brexit, which marked a geopolitical repositioning of the United Kingdom and a new ideological framing of Britain's role in the world, has also brought with it a new politics of immigration, of emigration, and of diversity. So, 10 years are really a long time. Major international events have shaped migration and also how we understand, debate, and frame it. I don't have much time, so just a few headlines to remind us what we have been going through as citizens, as a researcher, and for some of us also as migrants and refugees. In 2012, the first year of when IRiS was set up, we had the Olympic Games in London that celebrated Britain's diversity and made this diversity a distinct feature of what modern Britain wanted to look like in the eyes of the world. In the same year, Barack Obama, who embodied the dream of the post-racial society in the US, later a dream that was proved an illusion, launched the DACA program that was given deferring the deportation of undocumented young people. In 2013 to 16, we had the refugee crisis in the Mediterranean that brought millions of refugees and migrants in Europe and for some even posed a threat to the very structure of the European project. In 2016, we had Brexit, we had Trump. In 2020-21, we had the global pandemic that greatly impacted our experience and perception of what the interconnected world that we had learned from the language of globalization actually is, or can stop being in case of during the period of pandemic. In May 2020, the murder of George Floyd gave the new impetus to the Black Lives Matter movement in the US and globally, but tragically didn't end the police brutality against black and brown people, as we already saw last week with the death of Chris Kappa here in South London. What a decade, and so much for us to discuss when thinking to where we want to go with our research on migration and diversity in the years to come, and now to make it relevant to the people we work with in the future. I hope you enjoy the next 3 days of deep thinking, good conversation, and genuine exchange.